The challengers are all dressed up. We're not. That's okay. It's part one of the Challenge Ride or Dies reunion. I'm John Chidley Hill.
And I am Sheldon Alexander.
And this is You Killed It, the podcast talking about the challenge. I gotta say, you know what? That wasn't kind of me. I'm not dressed up. As usual, Sheldon, you look like $1,000,000.
I mean, I can't lie to you. When we first came on the feed, but we do our little pre-chat about nothing that actually involves a challenge, but more so our personal catch-up. I was about to say something, and I'm like, no, I'm going to save this for the pod because this is the vibes I'm coming in on right now. Okay, people who might not know or realize we are doing this pod from the city of Toronto. Okay,
yeah.
and if you watched last episode on YouTube, first off, shouts to the people that did. Secondly, if you did and you blessed us with a like and retweet, really appreciate y'all for doing that as well. But if you did watch the pod, you noticed that I was in a hotel room because I was in Cancun last week. And to get off of a plane, landing in Toronto today to a snowstorm, and then having it take like 2 hours to get home because people in Toronto they forget that it snows in the winter or something, and everybody all of a sudden can't drive, and so it takes forever to get anywhere in this city. Yeah, snowstorm, and it's like, yeah, to come right off the plane and you're in your tech suit and a hoodie and it's just freezing cold, and you're in like what are those like running shoes called that are just like all like they're just like super, super thin. But anyways, the point I'm trying to make is I was not winter ready at all. And to get off the plane into that, woo, that's a vibe. That's a vibe right there. So we're spicy to start this pod right now.
You got summer soft in your week away. That's the problem. You got to remain winter hard, my friend.
Right? Something like that. But let's get to this, right? What is this? Episode 246 of the You Killed It podcast. Ride or Dies, episode 20, the first episode of the reunion. And first off, why is this the reunion part one? Do we ever need two parts to the reunion?
No. And I have so many questions about just the formatting. First of all, this episode was an hour. I assume next week's is an hour. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I need 2 hours of reunion, maybe 90 minutes. Maybe they could have even made it an hour.
Well, what more do we need? What more happened in the season that we need to talk about?
That's fair. I don't know that we needed to rehash Jordan and Tori once again. The other thing...
Of course we did. That's a star. That's a face of the franchise. What do you mean?
The other thing I wanted to talk to you off the hop, there's two things. The first is the fits. Everyone was looking great except for Jay, who just like, buddy, you're not helping your friend move. Like it's not Friday night at the dance cave in 2006. Mm-hmm. Like you do better than just like a neon pink beanie or toque in Canadian and like some Vans shoes, no socks, and like a black shirt and black pants. Like, come on, buddy. Yeah. Everyone else is dressed up.
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like everybody else came with a little bit of swag, both sexes, men and women. You know what I mean? Everyone came with a little something, something. I thought that was pretty good. Right off the hop, I always got to give a shout out to Maria Menounos. She is one of the champs, underrated champs of just media. Yeah, the longevity that she's had in just doing like these fun, like her job is being on TV, but every time you see her on TV, she's having fun. Do you know what I mean? Like she has the best like hosting gigs and has done so for like, it's 2023. I feel like she was doing this in like the 90s. You know what I mean? And that's incredible. That's an incredible run. So huge shouts to her. My other question for you right off the top. They filmed this in London?
I have the exact same question. Previously, they've been filming in London because they would have British people on it. Mm-hmm. There are no British people on it. There's only one European on it.
Yeah, I have a theory, and this is a boring theory, so someone tell me if I'm wrong. I just think that the reason why it's done this way is because it costs less for whatever reason to produce this in London, England, than it does in the US. I don't know. I like that's my assumption. Like the crews come cheaper or whatever it is. Just a total production costs less to do it in London than it does wherever in the U.S.
I find that hard to believe just because off the hop, you're paying for hotels and accommodations for the cast plus Maria Menounos.
But you'd have to do that in New York
Yeah, but like,
or L.A.
yeah, but like some of them live in LA, some of them live in New York, right?
True.
So you're getting some savings on that. And also just like domestic flights are cheaper than
So
transatlantic flights, just
so
like
that part
full stop.
that part I'll agree with you. The stuff I'm more so talking about is how much it costs to hire a full crew and a
Mhm.
production team, right? Like that stuff might cost a lot less in London than it does in the US, especially once you start dealing with like unions and like certain fixed rates and fixed costs for producers and camera people and a set and where you're shooting it and day rates and how long the stuff is shot for. And again, I don't know the answer to this question. It's just I don't know, but maybe one of our listeners will be able to tell us and how that process works because I know huge shouts to our listeners who kind of crowdsource, the pods that have uh the challengers on it where they give like some insight and we're good at sharing information here, so we appreciate that.
The one thing I also wanted to point out is I thought everyone except Jay was really well dressed. I particularly like that Devin and Tori wore matching gold. I know it's obnoxious, but like if you're the champs, you've earned it. I like they're still showing their partnership. With that said, I don't know if it was an issue with the lighting or with the cameras or with hair and makeup, but
Mhm.
I thought everyone looked like shit.
Oh,
Like
the
like
makeup wasn't good.
no, I thought people either had too much makeup or not enough makeup. Like there was a lot of really shiny people. The lighting was really harsh. Like everyone looked much older, much more wrinkly. And
Mm,
like I don't I don't have the technical expertise to understand what was going on, but I thought like people like across the board, regardless of gender, I think everyone's attractive on this show. And like none of them looked particularly good, just like facial wise. Like Darrell looked
interesting.
super old. Thought like I'm not I can't I'm not even gonna single anyone out. That's not fair to Darrell because I just did, but like everyone looked bad. Like every time they cut to someone, I'm like, oh, I know they're more attractive than that. Like
Hmm, it's
either
interesting.
people
Okay.
had like makeup caked on but were still shiny.
Hmm.
And like I'm not talking like they had sparkles or like glitter in their makeup. I mean like shiny on the forehead. I was like,
Yeah, yeah,
can
yeah.
they get some powder? Did you notice that or is that just me?
I think like it's always jarring when people go from like outdoor settings to like
Yeah.
indoor settings. And, it's going to sound weird, but like if I turn off this light, do you know what I mean? Like, look at how different I look. And
Mhm.
then I turn on this light and I look completely different. And I'm doing that as like that's me sitting here on at my desk, like with a ring light I bought off of Amazon. But that sounds crazy, right? But you'd be amazed, and I'm gonna definitely tiptoe about how I say this. You'd be amazed of like how much goes into some professional lighting and like sets and all that stuff to still have some people not look good on camera. And
Yep.
and again, I'm choosing my words very carefully here for very obvious reasons. But the point I'm trying to make is that like it's hard. It's hard to do. And like I think it's on this pod we've talked about this. Insecure. Are you a fan of that show? Have you ever watched that show? Insecure, first off, is a must watch. That is a banger of a show. But secondly, one of the things that's super important about that show is just they talk about, and they've done behind the scenes episodes, talking to the production staff and the DOPs, director of photographies or camera people, directors, all that stuff, right? And they talk about the importance of lighting. And obviously I'm talking about an HBO like scripted series, right? So I understand that there's a different level of it, but it's just a reminder of how hard this stuff is. And like, on you would think that a professional production like MTV or Paramount or whatever, they would have a lighting person whose whole like thing is to figure out how can I make all these skin tones look good on camera, and that is a job. But I'm here to tell you that's not really how it happens sometimes. So you
Yeah.
have some scenarios where people are on camera and, you know, the skin tone is off, or, you know, they're too shiny, as you mentioned, or it just happens a lot, man, because it's a tough thing to do. And as we lessen our standards with things like podcasts, like what we're doing on a webcam, right? As we loosen the standards on because of like Instagram, or how much things we film on our phones and reels and all that stuff, we get thrown off when you then put people in a professional setting, meaning with like top tier cameras, right? But like we're not using the cameras to their full capabilities because we're not making sure the lighting is done well. We're not making sure the proper makeup is professional enough. Do you know what I mean? So you're in a studio and you have these cameras that are there to shoot like and see your pores, right? And see inside you. But if everything else doesn't match, it doesn't really work that way. You get away with it when you're dealing with, you know, different elements. You're outside, you're sweaty, you're, you know, the lighting's a little off. So you can be like, oh, the sun's over there, but whatever. But now when you're in a studio and the camera is like extra crispy perfect, if the lighting's off, if like your makeup people are only used to like doing makeup for a certain shade of skin tone, a lot of people are going to look off. And
Yeah.
that ends my TED Talk.
I mean, this is why I wanted to ask you, because given your professional expertise, I knew that you would know better than I would.
And also, please watch Insecure. It's a great show.
I will. I'll do it for you, Shelly.
I appreciate that.
Speaking of expertise, I feel like months ago we discussed this.
Okay.
But we have to revisit Johnny and Raven.
Yeah. Okay. First off, shouts to you, Raven, because you looked really good. Johnny, hey, I can say I'm a confident straight male. I could say, Johnny, I get it, man. Like you had these girls.
Good too.
Yeah. Hey, I get it. As you mentioned, a lot of good looking people on this show. Now, this was funny because Raven is saying Johnny is saying they came into the house as just friends. And Raven disagrees with Johnny, but the reasons that she's given for disagreeing were kind of hilarious, right? Like you could tell what was going on, right? Johnny's just flirting with her. He's, you know, joking around with her, whatever. And I'm sure that he was giving her more vibes that he wanted more than just friends. But he was also giving vibes that he wanted less in a relationship. And I think that's where Raven was wrong, right? Because the thing she's talking about is like, oh, we were touching on each other's body parts. There was fake humping. And she even said, quote, he wanted to see my titties.
No, like, this dude saw my titties, yo.
Sorry.
Because he asked.
My bad. I just thought that whole thing was hilarious, but then you felt bad for her because she ends up crying late at the end, right? And it's like, okay, first two things. That's when you remember these things are heavily edited, right? Because it went from joke to a hard cut to her crying. So you know there's stuff in the middle that was taken out. But I had no idea about. I thought Raven and Nerys were cool. I didn't realize there was beef. But they clearly are not fans of each other.
No. So when during the regular season of the show, the way this relationship was presented to us, the viewer, was that Raven was interested in Johnny. Johnny had sort of like flirted with her, but not really committed.
Yeah.
And she got hurt. And I remember at the time, you and I both said, like, he's being inconsiderate, but she also should not have come on the show.
Agreed.
Revisiting it and getting more details, I am more on Raven's side. I still believe that she shouldn't have come on the show. Like, she should have been smarter about it and didn't put herself in a position to succeed. And I don't think she can argue that they were in an exclusive situation.
No. Definitely
that
not.
Said, it was clearly like it had originally been presented to us as sort of like an unrequited crush. Like he knew that she had a crush on him. he would flirt, but like they never acted on it.
Yeah.
Clearly, they'd acted on it to some degree, and like he said, "Oh, we never kissed," but like it was more than just friends,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Like
Right. Like we
there's
know the
clearly a
vibes.
sexual
All
nature to
that.
the relationship.
We're all grown-ups listening to this pod, discussing on this pod. We know the vibes. We all
Yeah,
know Johnny, right? We all have if you're a dude, you got a Johnny in your crew. If you're a girl, you got a Johnny that one of your girls have been with. You know what I mean? Like we all know the vibes. We know what's going on here.
yeah,
The joke to me was like, not the joke. I take that back because this is not, I didn't think that this was funny. And this was the only misstep I think that Raven made was going at Nerys by trying to call out who she's been with on the show as
yeah.
if like, you're trying to diss her for that. And I give mad props to Nerys for just standing on it and being like, okay, like, is that supposed to offend me? Like, what's happening right here? Right. And like, other people started to jump in, and my line of the episode and the name of this podcast, when I think it was Anissa might have jumped in saying like, listen, like, that's your vagina. Like, you own it. Don't let nobody else try to tell you about what you should do about it or whatever. Right. Like I'm paraphrasing, but tell me if I'm wrong. And
Nope.
Nerys comes back and she just says, "Oh, I'm not worried. It drips gold, bitch." And I thought that is a banger line right there.
So,
Salute to you.
so is the title of the episode going to be "It Drips Gold," or is it going to be "That's My Vagina" or "That's Your Vagina"?
It drips gold, bitch, is going to be the name of this podcast episode.
Just going straight for the explicit tag, eh?
Correct.
Every so
Although
often.
I'll bleep the bitch, right? Like I'll spell it B and then like, asterisk TCH.
A little behind the scenes for our listeners. Apple, I guess, on Apple Music has an algorithm that scans podcasts to see if there's swearing in it, and then they automatically put an explicit tag on. And for the first like 2 years of this podcast, I was always like, let's just try to have one clean podcast. And inevitably, I was the one that swore. And I still don't think we've had a podcast where one of us doesn't swear. Like, I think it's usually me. I have the worst potty mouth.
Yeah, I will say, like, there's a lot of reason for I will skip ahead because I was gonna like deep dive and take us on a detour there, and it was just gonna take us further off because I want to stay on track here. There's a couple of things, right, that happen in this episode that are talking points that came up in the reunion, but I'm gonna phrase them to you, and we're just gonna give a yes or no answer to, right? And this like move on quickly, right? So Johnny Bananas and Mariah are still talking. Are you surprised by that?
No.
Oh, really? I'm stunned. I was like Darrell. I like Darrell as he always is, very diplomatic. Hey, it's not that serious. We all thought in the house that this wasn't going to last, and you guys weren't going to end up talking after this, and you are, and we're surprised by that. I'm Darrell.
I thought Darrell was quite kind in that moment, and I mean, I love Darrell, so like I'm not like stunned.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the reason why I wasn't surprised is because I follow them on social media.
Oh, that's not fair. What? That's cheat. Okay, we're moving on. We're cheat. That's cheat. Next topic.
Well, come on. And also, even without social media, which certainly helped, but even without social media, here's the thing, right? Like, they were so genuinely upset when it looked like Mariah was eliminated.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, like there's
something there.
This is a little real.
Mm-hmm.
This is a little real. So I wasn't like floored.
I got you.
I understand why everyone was cynical about it though. And Veronica, I mean, basically said that Johnny had cheated on his last girlfriend. But
which
like
is Morgan, right? News. Or no?
Like that's not like that was already sort of out there, right? Yeah. So like, I don't know. I don't think it was the best look for Veronica.
No, totally agree with that. It was not a good look for Veronica at all. I didn't really get what her MO was or what she was doing there. I thought that was very strange play by her. Well, my next question for you, we got a Jay and Michelle recap,
Whew.
right?
I got a
Which,
lot
like,
to say about these two.
my question though, they talked about her beef with Laurel and toilet water apparently, but is Michelle afraid of Laurel?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like that wasn't a difficult one. That was like super easy, and they could have just summed it all up there. Like Michelle does a lot of talking, a lot of talking, a lot of talking to like get to nowhere.
What I would add to that, though, is I think Michelle's scared of a lot of things and people and situations. Like, I
Fair.
don't think like Laurel is her one fear,
Mhm.
but she's definitely scared of Laurel. I think
I,
she's scared of Laurel, like physically, emotionally. Like, I think Laurel is all the way in the kitchen, all the way in Michelle's kitchen, and not through any like machinations on Laurel's part. Like, I don't think
mhm.
Laurel's like, oh, I'm gonna go intimidate Michelle this.
Laurel is also just a badass, right? Like Laurel is that person who like, when she described it as, "Oh, I'm just Philly," and people don't get that, like I'm just Northeast. Like I know that sounds almost like a cop out, but that is true, right? Like there's certain personality traits that some people just have. And if you're not used to that, it's going to throw you off. It's going to be a little different for you. And I think that's kind of the scenario that Michelle found herself with Laurel. She wasn't just used to that kind of energy.
And I think that's also important that Michelle's experience is not singular, it's not unique. Like
Mhm.
Laurel has a different gear, not just in competitions, but like in life. Like
Facts.
Laurel, and I love Laurel, and this is not a put down. She's a really intense person.
Yeah.
And like she's also can be a real introvert and like standoffish.
Mhm.
And Michelle took that personally when she shouldn't. And I think Laurel tried to explain that where she's like, listen, I'm an only child. I value my sleep. It's a hard space for me to be in. I was hurt. Like, yeah, I'm going to be off. I was tired. I was out of sorts. And you think that's about you, and it's not. And I also thought it was interesting that Michelle was like, oh, Veronica and Johnny both told me that you don't like me. And like then asked them for confirmation. And they both gave like really lukewarm like
Well,
Veronica was like, I don't recall saying that, but like I'm not gonna
which
say
means she
no.
definitely did.
I disagree. I think she didn't. Johnny Bananas and Veronica especially, they tell it like it is. Like they don't back down from shit. If
Okay.
Veronica talked shit about someone, I believe Veronica is gonna own it. Right?
Okay.
Like, and
Okay.
we'd seen it in the previous interaction where Veronica like went right at Johnny Bananas. I don't think she should have gone right at Bananas,
Mhm.
but I sorry, I need to say one more thing about this segment. Seeing the like, I hate the phrase highlight reel, but the recap of all of Michelle and Jay's missteps
Mhm.
strategically. Like, I don't know how they can ever plan to come back on this show. They looked so bad, especially when you watched like 2 minutes of them being dummies, basically. Like I'd forgotten about how mad Jay got when Jordan called him weak.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how they watched that without shame and contrition. Like I don't know how they didn't watch that and like said, Maria, I've had a month to think about it. Watching that highlight reel, I gotta tell you, I don't think I can see that I made some like errors in judgment. I would do things differently. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But nothing like that. Nothing along those lines.
Yeah. No, I totally find it was just strange. And like the last thing about these two, that camera stuff with that was weird. We can agree on that at least.
I agree 100% with Jack. I really like Jack.
Mhm.
Um, he was dressed like one of the Dudley boys. That's okay. But I I think he's 100% correct. Like if you're getting together with someone to try to sort out your beef and like have a genuine one-on-one interaction, and that person's like, oh, by the way, I'm bringing the camera, like I want to do some stuff for the gram, I'd also be put off by that.
Hell yeah.
I'd say, like, if I were in Jack's shoes, I'd be like, hey, that sounds great, but not this time. Like, we've got shit to talk about, and I don't want to pretend like we're cool when I still feel some kind of way.
Speaking of still feeling some kind of way, Jordan and Tori, we don't have to spend a lot of time on this because I know we're both not really like up for this, as we were done with it very much in the season of recapping Ride or Dies. But this was even dumber than a lot of the things that happened on the episode, because Jordan was he apologized from the beginning, saying everything. I'm wrong. This is why I was mad though. And I'm wrong for that. I was being emotional. I felt hurt. I felt as if, our relationship outside the game was being used out of a game of Monopoly, was being used, and I had emotional reaction. And I'm sorry. And she's still yelling at him. It's almost like she had a planned argument already in mind that she's been saving for the reunion, that she was going to say, hoping to get a clip on Twitter from the MTV account or something. Because he just said sorry from the beginning, and then it still took up 5 minutes of this episode. I don't want to talk about these guys, but that's just that was my takeaway. I just didn't understand it. I thought it was so stupid.
The one thing I'll say is it's so clear that Jordan and Tori need to not see each other for like a year because they're having fights about the fight. They don't know how to speak to each other civilly. They don't know how to, like, that fight is about every fight that they've ever had, right?
Yeah.
Like it's at this point, it's their dynamic, and they just need to reset their dynamic. I don't think they're ever going to get back together, but like, there's nothing more for them to say, and there's nothing more for us to say.
Yeah, totally agree with that. More quick questions. We got a Fessy and Mariah stuff. How are they ride or dies? I pretty much can just sum that up by saying Fessy hit up Mariah in the DMs.
Yep.
That might be the lowest bar for a ride or die, no?
Yeah, probably. I mean,
right?
the competition is Jordan and Anissa, but I actually think that Jordan and Anissa genuinely like each other,
and also, hold on, you talked about this during the season, right? About how Anissa being really good friends with Tori and Tori being Jordan's ex. That's a lot more of at least a starting point than like dude trying to shoot a shot in the DMs and girl saying yes finally after he got a blue check mark. Right.
You know what? It sounds like they're more ride or die than Johnny and Raven, though.
Fair. Maybe. Yeah, I have a lot of questions still about Johnny and Raven, but we'll save that for next season because they're all coming back. Did Bananas cost Nani a win?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think he helped her.
I don't think she gets as far without him. And also, I mean, we talked about this last week. What was ultimately their undoing was that they did that puzzle wrong with the bricks, with the cinder blocks. And that's on both of them. Like, they're equally culpable.
Exactly. And their arguing, I didn't think really hurt them. Right. I think most of the time Bananas knew when he could pick at Nani and he was making TV. I don't think it actually hurt them at any point throughout the season.
And Johnny put it well. It didn't help them, but it didn't hurt them.
Fair. Totally fair. Did Anissa actually have a chance to win this season? Like, she gave this whole spiel about how, the thing that hurt the most was this was like she actually thought she had a chance to win, and then the injuries kind of hurt. Like, that's what made it tough for her finishing out the season.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Here's the thing. Because, like, if you say, oh, well, like, you take away Anissa's injury, well, then they're in the game. But if you're taking away injuries, then you also should take away Olivia's injuries.
Exactly.
And Nani's injuries. And I'm sorry, I don't think Anissa and Jordan are beating Olivia and Horacio.
No.
And, like, I just think that it makes Johnny and Nani a little bit faster.
Yeah. Totally agree with you. You mentioned Olivia, who said that she broke her face in 5 places. And the doctor told her if the ball, like she just missed her eye, but if the ball had hit her in the eye, it would have gone right through and she would have died. So obviously, we're glad that didn't happen.
Obviously.
But is there a world where you could actually imagine that happening on an episode of the challenge? Like we saw it happen. We saw how serious it was. We saw the injury afterward. We saw all the blood. We saw all that. But to hear it put in that context, like imagine if that actually happened and it like hit her eye. Like, what would they have actually shown on TV? What would do you know what I mean? Like, you can't show someone dying, right? Like, it was
Yeah.
that close to that. Like, just to hear that context, like up the stakes of just what we're watching. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I guess what we're really saying is that was the worst injury in challenge history.
Yeah, if there's one that's worse, I don't remember off the top of my head, but think about that. She is what, inches away from that hitting her eye, and like, wow. Wow,
The
wow,
fact
wow,
that
wow,
she
wow.
fractured her skull.
Yeah.
So like we knew it was a broken nose, right?
Yeah.
And like I guessed previously that she broke an orbital, and
Mhm.
that was confirmed. But it sounds like she broke 2 orbitals and her nose and her skull, and then there's another bone that she wasn't able to recall, but like holy shit. And like it's so funny. I was out for drinks
Mhm.
uh with some of my peoples, and I was meeting my friend's new boyfriend for the first time.
Ooh.
Ooh. And I was explaining how, in my own words, I like trashy TV. And my friends were all like, oh, yeah, loves trashy TV. And he's like what? I was like, The Challenge. He's like, I'm not familiar with it.
Mhm.
So I was like giving him a recap. And like my other friends were like, oh, yeah, like he tells us like there's some pretty crazy injuries. I'm like, yeah, this past episode, this
Mhm.
one woman had her face broken in 5 places. And like I explained the injury.
Mhm.
I'm like, oh yeah, and also a part of her finger was torn off by a carabiner in an unrelated. And they're like, holy shit, what is the show? And it made me realize how much we have been desensitized to the violence on this show.
Correct.
To like
Totally
tell
correct.
people about it who've never watched it and be like, oh yeah, like this happens. Like Kyle had his finger broken. Like
Mhm.
this stuff happens, you know. Chet
Yeah.
has his chin split. Like
Yeah.
people get knocked unconscious sometimes. It's not great, but it happens. But like, yeah, they were horrible.
Totally true. Totally true. And it tiptoes around that fine line of, if it gets too serious, it's too much for me, right? Like, this still needs to
Yeah.
be fun. Which, skipping ahead a little though, the Nani mom montage and the crying, and Maria Menounos can even get through the on camera. I was like, okay, like, you know, all power to Nani, massive, amazing. This is too much for me right now. I don't know if this is why I tune into the challenge. It's getting a little heavy right now, but like, credit to her, and credit, like, you had people just crying. And I feel though they tried to squeeze in a cutaway of Johnny with his head down to make it look like he was being emotional. But when he lifted his head up, like, it just looked like it could have been just a random cutaway that they tried to sneak in on us.
Yeah.
I just want to say, I see you, editors. I see you. I see you. But yes, if I stick to our bit here, Devin and Tori, okay, did they obviously try to not win challenges so that they could avoid having to pick a side in the house?
Yeah, I think that's clear.
Right? Yeah, totally.
And like, I mean, they played it for laughs, and then it was pretty great that they pulled the safe dagger so they didn't have to answer the question. But also, I think that's completely legitimate.
That's a
Like,
challenge.
I think that's a valid strategy, right?
That's a
Like
challenge.
that you want to be good but not great at some of these. And like we like had readers suggest this, or readers, listeners suggest this. And like I think there's one challenge in particular where Jay and Michelle one, and like and that was the one where they had to dig stuff up, and then they had to
Yeah. I
zip
remember that.
line, and like everyone did really badly except for Jay and Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
But like, especially when Jay and Michelle were doing so badly in the house, and you were Devin and Tori, and you had that sort of secret alliance with them, why wouldn't you let them just keep shooting themselves in their foot? Right?
Yeah.
Like, let them take the heat. Why not?
Totally. I see that Michelle, as I was looking for something else, but I see that Michelle 12 minutes ago tweeted out a clip from, I guess, Laurel being on Bananas' podcast. I don't know who's talking. Oh, yeah, it is Laurel on Bananas' podcast. And Michelle says the comment I was referencing in the reunion was about Laurel believing I was fake because I wanted to be in a showman's with Bessie. Untrue, because I actually had a pass with them. And that led to her treating me differently, which is what I felt. Anyways, I don't care about this. And like Michelle, Laurel doesn't really care about this. You're making a big deal. And even if Laurel did say that, which I'm sure she did, because here's a clip that you decided to post it. Why didn't you bring that smoke on the, like we were there, like you were there? You had a chance to bring it up. I don't even
Here's
want
the
to give
other thing,
Michelle
though.
credit about this and talk about this. I'm sorry.
Well, here's the other thing that I find frustrating about
It also
Michelle.
distracted me from what I was actually looking for, Michelle. Damn it.
Here's the other thing I find though about Michelle is she started saying in the house to anyone that would listen, the vibes are off with Laurel. The vibes are off with Laurel. The vibes are off with Laurel.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, inevitably, Laurel's going to say, yeah, the vibes are off because you keep saying that the vibes are off. Like, just be cool and let me, like, leave me alone, and like, I'll come around. And so then to say, like, to bring up a podcast that Laurel did months after the fact where she was like, yeah, I was fucking turned off. Of course she was.
Yeah.
You were like throwing her in, you were being weird, you were like saying the vibes were off. What we have to go on is remember they had a conversation in the house.
And we saw it
And
in
Michelle
color.
was like, the vibes are off. And Laurel's like, I don't know what to tell you. No, they're not.
Yeah.
That's
Michelle
like,
played
you
herself.
have to go with what was happening at the time. And at the
Mhm.
time, Laurel was just being Laurel. She's a little weird with everyone. It's
Yeah.
fine.
Totally. The last thing I want to talk about from this episode, okay,
Mm-hmm.
is there is a question. Should outside people be allowed to help in eliminations? I'm going to pose a question to you, but I will also say that on the challenge Twitter account, at the time that we are recording this, there are almost 2,500 votes, right? The question says, what do you think? Should outside players be allowed to help during the elimination? 33.5% say definitely, absolutely not, 66.5%. Mr. John Chidley Hill, I see your facial reaction for the people who are listening to this pod. You don't like those results, but I will let you plead your case.
As you were telling me that, I looked it up on Twitter and I voted that it should definitely be allowed. I think Jordan is entirely right. And also, notably, everyone except Jay and Michelle was agreeing that's the way
Yeah.
it's always been. It's going to happen. Jay and Michelle were just mad because it didn't work for them. And Bananas made this point.
Mhm.
It didn't work for you because people wanted you gone. Like, part of this game is a political game, a social game. You got to have your allies. I do see what Michelle was saying and understand what she was saying, that it was different. It's different when someone's offering you strategy versus drowning out drowning out your partner in a competition where communication is important.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
like, I do think that's splitting hairs.
Mhm.
But I also thought Devin was right when he's like, no one was mad when we did it to Turbo because Turbo sucks.
Big facts. Super facts.
I gather you agree that it's
Yeah,
definitely
I was one of the people that voted for definitely as well. So I'm part of that 33.5%. And what's the line of the whole challenge? All's fair in love, war in the challenge. I mean, that's that.
I'd also point out that
The
if
other no, go on. Sorry.
I was just gonna say if Jay and Michelle had a stronger alliance, if they hadn't turned on Laurel and Jack for no reason,
Mhm.
if they had somehow reined in Johnny from being an idiot and calling out everyone, if they had like continued to like play a less messy game, they wouldn't have had people drowning them out.
Yeah,
They
agreed.
very much brought that energy on themselves. Like that's on them. It's more on Michelle than Jay, but Jay also, frankly, was a dick this season,
Mhm.
right? Like, and I agreed with Jordan's assessment that like you can find a way. You can find a way to win any of these competitions.
Yeah. No, totally agree with you. No, no, no counter to that at all. I also just think that the thing that makes a challenge different than every other competition reality show is that your relationship with the other challengers matter way more. And
Yep.
so, as much as it might be a physical crazy competition, if you ain't got the numbers in the house, then that's on you. It's just part of the game. It's part of the challenge. You don't like it, go on Big Brother
Yeah, I agree
or
completely.
Survivor.
Or Survivor. Go to those quiet shows. Go to those PG shows. But I just think that one of the major problems, if not the major problem with Michelle and Jay, is that they're not ready to accept that their behavior led to them losing.
Yeah.
They're not yet at a stage where they can be accountable for their own behavior, and it costs them. I
Yeah.
like Jay. Like in previous seasons, like remember when he beat CT in elimination? I liked Jay.
Yeah.
In theory, I should like Michelle, but they just self-destructed so badly, and they're for whatever reason not in a place where they can be like, "Yeah, we blew this. Like this is on us."
Yeah.
Right? The fact that Jay, when he went out to the gym with Jack, like Jack was giving him a second chance, and he blew it. That's just on Jay. That's 100% on Jay. That's not Michelle. It's not Jack. That's just Jay. At the mention of Turbo, Maria Menounos says that they're having Turbo call into the show.
I think it's a bluff.
Do you?
Yeah.
I hope it's a bluff because I really want the Turbo era to be over with.
Yeah. Uh, fair enough. I
I
could see that. I could see that definitely. I'm over Turbo. Like Turbo, yeah, I feel the exact same way as the rest of the cast did.
He's just there's no space for someone like him who's I think a misogynist,
Yep.
who I think is violent and dangerous and unstable and like dangerous like and he's bad TV. Like there's no redeeming qualities to him,
Yeah. Yeah. I
right?
totally agree. I totally agree. Turbo, and like, I just think that where's Turbo live again? Do we know where he
Turkey.
lives? He lives in Turkey.
Yeah.
But either way, like, it should be a way for him to be able to get to this reunion if it's in London, no? So,
Yeah.
like, I also think that if he was there, someone would have seen him. And because that hasn't happened, I don't buy it that he's actually there.
The only thing I'll say in the other direction is if they ended this episode on the like cliffhanger of like Turbo's calling in, if it then starts with them being like, psych, he didn't call in, I think viewers would be mad.
Really? Because of Turbo?
Well, not because they want to see Turbo, but just be like, why did you threaten us with having to deal with Turbo for 5 minutes?
Yeah. No, I could get that. But I also think that if that's the case, like, they also were just in dire need of having some form of cliffhanger to trick us into thinking that there is an actual cliffhanger for next episode. And there isn't.
And also, it speaks to the fact that this probably could have been one 90-minute episode.
Also true. Also true.
Um,
I think that the 90-minute episode thing, like, I mean, it's an easy fix, but I thought 20 episodes is a nice round number for MTV. And who knew that 21 needed to be the number? I'm so confused by that.
yeah, I agree.
That was pretty good. I like
My
that.
random music just started playing off my phone. The most important question of this episode, Sheldon, is who killed it for you this week?
Maria Menounos, still going strong. Big shouts, Maria Menounos.
I'm going to go with, I think still, actually, you know what? I was going to say Devin and Tori, but scratch that.
Okay.
I'm going with Bananas and Mariah.
Okay.
For being like the real deal, proving the haters like Sheldon Alexander wrong, and being an actual relationship. And like, I'm just a fan of Love, Sheldon. I love love.
That's funny. Well played. Well played. I'm not mad at that, John. I'm not mad at that.
Where can the good people find you on social media?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Shell Alexander, on Instagram at Sheldon Alexander, and huge shouts to all the people that have been rocking with us on the YouTube page. We really enjoy it. Thanks for sending in all your comments. We see them, we read them, we love them, appreciate them. And yeah, continue to bless us with the like on the YouTube page. That helps a lot, helps spread the word and give the pod to a new audience, right? Like people that haven't stumbled upon our challenge pod yet. We still get more listeners each and every week, and we appreciate that, adding more people to the community. So thank you for that. And where can the people find you, my friend?
They can find me at J Chidley Hill on Twitter and Instagram. And until next week, this was You Killed It.
You killed it.
That was a different one.
I wish I could explain what was actually going on. And I know the people can still hear us right now, but that's amazing. I'm just going to let this rock out for a little more before I end this pod.